Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the Hibiscus cycle PTG, and this is the first of the TC sessions. We have, I think, 5 hours set aside for TC discussions, but then there's a lot more that's going on today and tomorrow between cross projects and the rest of the week in other rooms. So. What's happening in this room is probably a catch-all, and we like starting this off with a meeting with other project leaders across the community. So this is PTLs, co-reviewers, and anyone that's helping maintain our projects. Really, if in my book you're all leaders because you're shaping our projects, and this is a good place to bring concerns and discuss things that we ought to drive within the projects and hence across all of OpenStack in that sense. We have a few agenda items to seed the discussion. Of course, we'll try to make some space for an open discussion and add any topics that you might want to bring in today. So without further ado, I think the first one that wanted a spot for this was Kendall. Do you want to try going through yours?
Yeah, sure. So hopefully, as a lot of you know, I organize and facilitate our university partnership program. So I act as like a go-between for professors looking for projects for students to work on and our wonderful OpenStack community here. So I had created this Etherpad around the time of the last PTG in October of what year are we? 2025. We're in 2026 now. And it would be great to get attention on this again to update what exists there. And I have two different kind of sections on it. So at the top, if you open the Etherpad on line 44, you can see that there's like a place to submit projects, and it has like what OpenStack project is associated with it, kind of like a title, a basic description, preferred or required skills of the students, and then who would be doing the mentoring and when it was added, just so that we can keep an eye on like what might be going stale or whatever. Thank you, Artem, for having provided an excellent example right at the top of that Etherpad. Hopefully that's still valid. If not, we'll get it updated. But if you don't have a specific project that you're interested in proposing for students to work on, just having your name on like being a mentor, if you're interested in mentoring and could come up with a project later, you can add your name further down at the bottom with Gotham and Carlos. I will note that I will have an opportunity coming up in just a couple weeks. Carnegie Mellon University, who a few on this call have worked with previously, are going to be having I think it's going to be 11 weeks, but I can confirm that during the summer program. And students will be expected to spend a full 40 hours a week on whatever project you propose to them that they end up selecting. I'm trying to see, is Steven on the call? Because I know he's worked with them before. Gotham, I'm not sure if you've worked with Carnegie Mellon before. I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
yeah.
A good crop of students. And
yeah. I know last summer the students weren't as rigorously held to the 40 hours per week, but that is going to be renewed. So that is a requirement for students. So you will get lots of time with them, basically. The only other thing that Carnegie Mellon specifically asked for is to have 2 mentors per project, just for resiliency, which I'm sure we can all understand, being pulled on to other things because we also all have day jobs. But I will continue to use this resource as other universities crop up and are interested in projects for students to work on. So it's not just limited to these Carnegie Mellon students that'll be starting in, I think, about a month. I think towards the end of May is when it is. Like I said, I can confirm that if you're interested or have those questions. But we also work with a variety of universities in the US, and I'm really trying to get established with a couple of universities in Korea, one in China, and perhaps some in Europe as well. I've been talking to again. So, yes, that is a good note. The Etherpad will live long, so please add your names and projects at any time. Are there any questions? No. Cool. So, yeah, populate your projects. If you don't have a project right now, that's fine. Populate your names if you're interested, and I'll be in touch.
Are there deadlines? I guess.
I'd say generally not for this Etherpad. For Carnegie Mellon specifically, if you want to be a part of that round of proposals, I would say if you could have your project proposals in by like the first week in May, like the May 5th would be great. And then if there's any other conversation, I'm happy to put you in touch with the professors so that you can get your questions answered directly and I don't have to be the bottleneck. But yeah, so to participate in the Carnegie Mellon, a round of mentorship over the summer, let's have project proposals by May 5th. Good question, Clark. Any others? Cool. Quick and easy. Back to you, Gotham.
Awesome. Thank you, Kendall. All right. And I put a heavy topic on next, and this would be around the community goals. We've had, some discussion space here in this sort of forum session from PTG to PTG. We don't have to get into way too many details, but we will probably want to bring up anything that we want the project maintainers to be aware of, and things that are stalling. And I thought Ghanshyam probably has had his hands in multiple goals, and so maybe he can take on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Just
Yeah.
Cool. So I'd like to start with RBAC thing, the few of the thing I'm planning to do it here, and then definitely someone can, even I think the Harne can go with the event-led stuff and all. So in RBAC, I don't see any much progress from other projects which has not done the phase 1 or phase 2. And I feel like we are kind of reaching at the saturation of this goal. Like whatever project wanted to complete, they completed. And somewhere, if the projects left are not interested, even though they still have the RBAC thing, I'm not sure how how much we can force it, and if we can just make it that everything documentation and how to do your RBAC changes is there, and we don't need to drag this goal for indefinite time. So that is what I felt in this cycle, but still there are a few things to do. That's why at least in 2026.2 this cycle, I'll try to continue for this goal and also the champion for this goal. The one thing I'll be changing, which was due to remove the enforce scope configuration. So as you know, in SRBAC, we have the scope for each rules, and most of like all the project except Ironic and Keystone, they are scope to project only. But we did for the migration or transition purpose, we had a configuration flag to switch on or off that scope checks. But our main intent was to have the scope thing hard coded, not configurable. So my goal is to remove that enforce scope configuration, which was enabled by default a couple of cycles before. So those scopes are obviously checked by default. But that when I saw at least the NOAA thing, because we have written a lot of unit tests for SRBAC. So when I saw in the NOAA thing, it require a little bit, not little bit, maybe much work to refactor the unit test of SR back, because in Nova we have written 4 cases of testing. One is legacy one, other is legacy with scope, other is the new default without scope, and other one, last one, is new default with scope. So scope configuration going away will reduce those 4 things to test to only 2, and I'm sure that might be the case in other projects. So my next step is, because we are early in the cycle, to send an email starting the some timeline, or depends on, I'll check the when is the Oslo library uh, uh, feature freeze are for this cycle, that will be removing this info scope from Oslo, and definitely it will impact unit test or other things, so that can be updated or cleaned up. And I'll start with the Nova to do that, and that is the one last thing pending. And yeah, I think that's the pretty much on this. And as I said, this cycle is something I'll keep holding the meetings, monthly meetings. I will be available to answer the things if they're. I'll be available to help the things. And if those leftover projects are not interested or not showing any progress, I'll just say uh, keep them, like whenever you want, you can implement the SR back. Because I'm not sure how much push or what else we can do on this. But pretty much like there are most of the projects has the new things there, and I hope operators are using those. If any question I can answer here. Otherwise, I do hold the monthly meeting every Monday, which is mostly I'm the only one, but I do hold, like, if in case any question are there. But definitely you don't need to wait for monthly meeting. You can reach out to me or send a email on mailing list, and I can answer if there is any question or doubt.
Makes sense. Thanks, Kansham. Is there anything in terms of like anybody that has a bigger gap than the other projects that's going to prevent some work from happening? I see folks typing out some project names um, around N4 scope itself, for instance.
I have to check. So the thing was, like, if we remove the configuration option, definitely there will be a failure in unit test which are testing the no scope thing, because the scope thing will always be there if we remove that, right? So I have to. That's why, like, we have to do some pre-work on the test side before we remove. And that's where I'm going to start that effort with the mailing list. And yeah, but I don't think there is any blocker or something. Means that was supposed to be removed, I think 2 or 3 cycle back, but I'm not very fast or eager on removing the things. Just keep the things for transition purpose as long as we can. But definitely this is the cycle I'm planning. And the only, yeah, the unit like testing things is something we need to tweak, or I'll say just drop the testing of the no scope thing, because there will be no such thing in after once we remove the configuration option. Yeah, thanks, Gautam, for the meeting link. Yeah, that link has the information, Brian, and uh, yeah, yeah. And I can push up the paths which remove the config option so that it can be tested to see what all things failing or not. So yeah, I think that will be a good idea. So I'll push the patch and then put it on mailing list, and then we can progress. We'll see how it goes.
Yes, as far as as far as I know, enforce scope is already enabled by default. So the first thing we have to check will be to find out any existing remaining override. Then that will be a good sign of breaking things by moving that option, I guess.
Yeah, I have those list of projects in the Etherpad when we enable it by default a couple of cycles before, like Barbican, Tacker, or a few more. So they were not ready on the new default, but this cycle I'm targeting. I pushed on the Barbican to enable it by default, which is failing. So I'll be reaching out to the team and say these are the enforce scope is disabled in your project, which is I think 5 or 6 project only, and then they have to enable it, make it work to enable it before we remove it. That's a good thing, Takashi. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Jeremy has another thing that I think is a bigger implication of what is happening, right, with these inconsistent implementations that we are starting to see, bugs being reported, and these are sometimes reported as private security bugs to suggest that hey, this stuff is broken, and I was supposed to be a read-only user, but I can do stuff in some of these services and so on.
Yeah, I mean, the RBAC thing is still like, there. If even like at the layer of this enforcement, if still, and we don't, restrict them, or we don't have that kind of the code which can prevent such information leak or such thing, then definitely in the RBAC we can make those defaults much better. If it has to go from read only to member or manager or admin role, but I'll say still that doesn't fully solve the security risk, because policies are configurable, right? And I'll say we have to make sure our code also, so that it doesn't leak any information, say for example admin only information to reader role or something. So that audit has to be done, because one example, if I see in NOAA, when reader can see the migration list, reader role can still see the migration list or detail of migration, but we hide the host information or any compute related infrastructure information in the response to the reader user versus response to the admin user. So those kind of stuff has to be solved. But yes, it has to be carefully audited what our defaults are, and definitely those can be changed by operator if they see like this stuff should not be allowed for their reader in their cloud. It can be done in admin, but still the code we need to make sure we are much going in a safer path if the read role is coming in.
I guess one distinction to make is while individual services can enable or disable these flags, for an operator in an actual production deployment, you have to set these consistently for every service. And that was called out in the original community goal, that you can't enable the new defaults in Nova and have them disabled in Glance and have a secure system, because the actual role-based system is not limited. I'm not going to use scoped. Limited to a token in a particular project. If you have an admin token anywhere, it's admin everywhere. And if you've got reader token anywhere, reader enforcement will only propagate if you have the new defaults enabled everywhere. So there's kind of two paths to it. It's like, what does the service allow you to configure, and what does the library allow you to configure, and then what is reasonable to do in production. And reasonable to do in production is a much smaller set. You either have scope enforcement turned on everywhere, or it's turned off everywhere, but a mix is not a good pattern to use, and same for the new defaults.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Jeremy.
For me,
Yeah, just to clarify, my comment on the Etherpad was specifically about services that haven't implemented certain roles yet, and then users getting confused about whether or not a particular role is applicable to a given service. And it seems like we don't have it documented in a consistent way for operators or end users to understand which of these roles is useful right now in what services and which ones are not going to work yet in whatever version of the cloud they happen to be deploying or interacting with.
yeah, no, that's a good question. I wrote that document in Noah where it explicitly tells that what all role Noah support, and it was like updated when we supported manager role later on. So I think such documentation on project side is helpful. Like if they say, okay, I mean, for a few of the project, reader role might not be applicable at all. So if they say that, okay, these are the role this service support, and this is kind of information or the operation allowed for such roles, I think that's definitely we need from project sides.
I guess one gap that we have never filled is basically there is no way to ask a cloud via its REST API what roles and what scope enforcement have been enforced, which means it's just not discoverable. Like if I interact with Vexel's Cloud OVH, I, without reading the documentation, can't know what to expect when I talk to that API endpoint. Should I be using member? Should I be using whatever? And it's kind of been left to the operator to document that somewhere in their offering. Yeah.
But don't you get a list of roles when you get your token?
You do, but you don't necessarily know. You can only hope that the operator did the right thing, right? So if the cloud is configured to support the reader role and you have member and reader, then you can infer that in theory I've got read-only access. But because we left it to the operator to make sure that they configured everything correctly, you can't be sure that the placement you're talking to or whatever properly enforces reader.
But you can ask for a token with a particular role, I guess, or with a limited set of roles. What would be your recourse? I guess my point is, if they didn't do it right, that seems like a strange situation to put on, or a strange onus to put on the user.
Well, it's more, I believe, if you have an upgraded keystone that supports the delegation, your default user is going to, if you had a member role, will also have the reader role always. So looking at your token, I don't think tells you that the cloud you're talking to supports reader for talking to Nova or not. Anyway, this is kind of documentation. I don't know if we can ever fix that without doing a large bit of rewrite. I just want to.
In the past, I was wondering about a kind of a generic middleware which returns a policy content from API, like /policy rules, returning the bare policy or even the evaluated result of policy rules, like IAM does in AWS. But
yeah,
that kind of a thing might be.
We've talked about that before, right? I guess it seems really strange to me to like expose the list of things to try to sneak through.
Yeah.
Not like an like it's secure if we don't, but I don't know. It's kind of like giving people a roadmap.
Yeah, there is a driver with an also policy to let also policy to, I mean, the currently an external API to get the policy evaluation result. I think that is the base implementation someone introduced to, I mean, aiming to implement something similar to IAM, but yeah, that hasn't been completed yet. So yeah, this topic has been discussed quite multiple times, but nothing has been yet established to support the whole use case.
I guess I really hate the idea that that users need to pull the policy to determine what to do.
Yeah, and for admin operator, at least we we do have that Oslo tool, right, which can give you a set of policies applied currently either via defaults or files. So it's not like it's not very undiscoverable, but I agree exposing just to the users is another risk, right, via the API or something. And it's same like configuration, right? If you think about any configurations what operator has done in their cloud, they should have to go and check what all things they configured instead of every user can fetch it.
I think the easy workaround for this could just be like a well-known discovery document that Keystone could just go and hit and get to learn about the cloud from Keystone. So someone just sets that, if that option is enabled, then when Keystone, before it hits v3 auth, it can just hit like well-known /Keystone or something and learn about the cloud. We already have that cloud profile concept. It could just, instead of living in arbitrary places, it could just live next to Keystone and expose whatever assumptions are about the cloud that would be exposed there.
I think we're diverging away from the core topic a little bit. This is great design. For sure, we have to pick that up somewhere else. I think the highlight regarding what the community should do around
For me,
SRBAC
it's idea.
maybe. So, is there anything else to be talked about for SRBAC? If not, we can.
No, sorry. Yeah, I'm on this. So yeah, we can move to the next call.
Okay. And it looks like the other approaches, the other brainstorming can happen during the SRBAC meetings. One of the things that the reasons why this is a big topic here is because we're not talking about SRBAC specifically in the rest of the PTG, but we'll be talking about eventlet removal tomorrow at the as a cross-project session. But I don't know if Hervé is here or anybody that wants to talk about eventlet briefly. Probably not. Is anybody, does anybody have anything to share about eventlet progress in their projects? Anything to bring up to the TC? If not, I think the other active goal that we have is around root wrap to PrivSep, and that's not gotten any updates, I think, in the last cycle. Correct me if I'm wrong, and if project folk know anything about that.
That's actually related to the eventlet removal as well, because there was a decision made that root wrap was not going to be ported to the non-eventlet world, and the impact on that for, say, Nova is Nova moved everything to PrivSep except for the fact that it still needs to use root wrap for OSBrick, because OSBrick doesn't use PrivSep. So there's kind of gotchas like that where Nova is technically root wrap free except for that one place, right?
Are we not starting PrivSep with root wrap?
The PrivSep helper does that, yes, but you can invoke that without having it locked down by the root wrap daemon as well. You can just invoke the thing directly. Let me say that in a less dumb way. There's two ways to start to use PrivSep. You can either spawn the daemon separately and then connect to its socket, which no one does, but it's implemented, or you can use the PrivSep helper. The way that Nova is doing it is we're just calling the PrivSep helper, but we also ship a root wrap config that says the user is allowed to sudo and call this one command.
Right. So we're still using root wrap to start the helper, right?
We're doing a sudo call that gets incepted by root wrap, I think. I'm not sure if we're actually calling into root library or if we're just using that configuration for sudo. But you
Okay.
could just write that configuration filter for your sudo's file by hand.
I
right?
thought we were still using root rep for it, but maybe not.
Yeah. So that would, I guess, be the other touch point, I guess. I don't know if anyone as part of the root or the eventlet removal has made sure that root wrap is not there if that's not going to get ported. Or if there's been any update on that from the Oslo side. But like my understanding was they weren't going to continue to maintain root wrap.
I'm going to add that question to tomorrow's discussion.
I actually wonder if there's any projects that actually are still using root wrap, because I'm searching on code search and I can't really come up with anything that is still importing it. At least unless I'm doing a search that's not correct, but maybe it's just a completed community goal at this point.
So whether or not they're importing it is slightly different from whether it's been used by a sub-process when we invoke things, because that's the pattern we had for root wrap in a lot of cases.
Right, but wouldn't it be in some requirements, some .txt somewhere for those projects down the line?
I don't believe so, because I think also root wrap was kind of assumed to be there, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I'm thinking down the chain at some point it's going to be the dependency of something. But yeah, you did mention OS break, so I don't know. Okay, so maybe my my code search is not working properly.
Yeah, I'd also look for root wrap config, I think. And those files are pretty big if there's a heavy usage of root wrap configuration. And folks, you can drop your comments directly on the Etherpad if you'd like. Helps us keep notes. All right, I think we have 20 more minutes and there are a couple of more topics. Is there anything else to be talked about with respect to these goals? It's a good call out regarding root wrap. Thanks, Sean. That said, there's going to be a few more. Sorry. Yeah, Sylvain, go ahead.
No, it was more for information. We'll discuss on Friday about the opportunity to ask projects to add more contributor docs and maybe to add more doc strings or something like stuff for helping the LLMs to consume. So it could be some kind of TC goal. Unfortunately, I haven't yet looked at the template because I guess we'll have a lot of different questions about what's the end goal for it. If it's about whether it's about doc strings or it's about context. I mean, I don't know. So before talking it more, I need to find time to create some kind of draft before we go.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good call out. And I think besides these, there's a couple of other goals that are going to be coming in. I think Dimitri and Doug Goldstein are looking at a MariaDB collations related goal, and there is also a testing goal that we'll need to take on. We are, going through an event-led transition around the time where, we're also going to have to start supporting Python 3.14, and that's going to be a part of the PTI for the next release. So we might take up a goal to do some pre-work for that. While I say that, we've not identified a goal champion or even somebody that can take on this work. In the past, the QA team, mostly Kansham, has been doing a lot of this, transition of our PTI and getting, the dev stack and Tempest tests in order. So that sort of concerted effort is required again to get it tested with 3.14. So a community goal would be ideal for that as well. Is there anything else that we anticipate to take on as community goals that we need to let people know about? All right.
There's one kind of unofficial goal that's been progressing for a while, which is a number of projects are trying to get rid of their own specific Python clients and either move entirely over to OSC or the SDK, etc. I don't know if that should become more formal than it is. So, for example, Neutron is actively trying to get rid of Nova using the Neutron client to talk to Neutron. We did some initiatives in Watcher last cycle to stop talking to Nova via the Nova client and move over to the SDK. So unofficially, Watcher's going to try and get all of the interactions over to the SDK. But I don't know if that should be a more formal thing or a pop-up team or just leave it to the community to do as it has been doing. But obviously, things like Horizon and Heat or the projects that talked a lot about the projects are the ones that are more impacted. Whereas if you're working on a Leaf project that doesn't really get called by other projects, you've got less work there. So yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah, the last time this came up, I think we agreed not to formalize that as a goal yet, given that it was happening organically and it was driven by mostly project teams. And yeah, there is a TC resolution, I think, that says we prefer if everybody stops, supporting these native clients and start supporting work in OpenStack SDK and the CLI. So there's like a general direction and an inclination towards it, but not a concerted effort like a goal. The problem with the goal becomes, can we cover all of the use cases? Because there are going to be certain projects that want to develop, native clients and so on. That might be one of the contentious reasons from what I remember.
Yeah, and I think regarding the Nova case specifically, Laos, I think he had added a topic to the Nova discussion this week, so he might talk about that.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, it's a wrap on goals. Let's talk through the next couple of topics. I think one of them is the launchpad hygiene topic. This came up at the TC meeting last week, so it's fresh off the press. There's a bunch of launchpad misconfigurations. We kind of discovered this when we were working through security bugs, which is going to be the meat of the next topic, so I won't give you too much of a preview over there. But Launchpad's the biggest, set of trackers that we have for all of OpenStack projects. Operators are very familiar with it. They file bugs all the time, and we're starting to see some inconsistencies and some things that prevent us from doing proper work around security issues, for instance. So take a look at this gist. It kind of gives you a picture of what's misconfigured today from what we discovered. So some of these are things like we have individuals that own the teams that manage these trackers, and these individuals probably no longer work on OpenStack or on in these specific project teams. We've had time and again an issue where core reviewers or PTLs are not able to do any work on Launchpad, given that they were never part of a team and so on. This is friction that we've tried to resolve through making requests to Launchpad over time. But please, if there is something that you can fix, like for example, I think bug triage and bug supervisors, they ought to be teams as well, so that it's more sustainable for us when people move, when people change what they're doing and so on. So if their focus is falling off, you at least have somebody else that can pick up and help, and we don't have to chase administrative help to get things fixed in Launchpad. That's mostly what this topic is about, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. The only thing is I'm thinking of writing a how to do Launchpad right kind of a doc for our project team guide. And maybe it'll come to moot, right? Because everyone that's currently working on stuff would have fixed everything by then. But it's a good reference to have in case, because we just have too much tribal knowledge in that area. And looks like Takashi already fixed something. Was there anything else that folks want to talk about with this topic? In general, as a project maintainer, if you need any help with your Launchpad issues, if you're not on a team that you need to be on, etc., you can come to the TC channel and tell us about it, or you can go to OpenStack Infra. More often than not, your team is owned by the OpenStack admins group, which is owned by the OpenStack Infra folks, and they can help you make those changes. And in case where there aren't, we've just filed a transfer request so that we can get all of them owned by the OpenStack admins group. All right, thanks, Jeremy. That was it's a good call out on how the projects are configured on our project config, and that's kind of where we discover what a project is even using. Is it using Storyboard? Is it using Launchpad and so on?
Brief question. Do we actually have any active projects still using Storyboard, or is that something that could be cleaned up in our docs to basically just say we use Launchpad for everything?
Yeah, we do. We have projects that are using Storyboard. You can query that thing, but I was thinking of like the major groups that are using Storyboard might be like the client and so on. Yeah, Jeremy.
The only reason I pointed out where the mapping from repository names to project names is tracked is if you're trying to audit this stuff, then you may be in some cases looking at dead or defunct entries on Launchpad. If your analysis was based on just guessing what the names are, you really need to follow through from the source of truth on the Launchpad project name mapping that we maintain to know which projects and then which teams referenced in those projects need to be updated.
Thank you. That's a good call out to me. All right. Yeah, I'll go through that again, that list again with this mapping and see if there's anything that's different. All right, we have 10 more minutes. I want to give us some time for open discussion. But before that, we have we have Jeremy and Jay, who are the security SIG chairs. And I'm just going to throw the mic at you and say, do you want to give us a lay of the land on what's going on?
Sorry, fumbling with my mute. Yeah, it's well, from a security SIG perspective, as you've pointed out, we now have 2 chairs because I basically inherited the chair position from Gage when Microsoft moved him onto other activities not related to OpenStack. And I did not really have time to do any of the chair duties. So most of the sorts of things that that he had previously been doing, like holding meetings and that sort of stuff, did not get done under my watch. but more recently, Jay has volunteered to pitch in on that sort of stuff. So I very much welcome his assistance in that regard. From a vulnerability management team perspective, we have taken on some new and increasingly active people in the VMT. Jay joined us last year and has been immeasurable help. And then Gautam just joined us in the last month and has been ramping up very quickly. Has already done some advisories, and it's been a huge assistance. We do have worries with some of the increase in workload coming from LLM, AI, machine learning oriented sources, both in terms of the increase in noise from bogus vulnerability reports, as well as the potential for actual vulnerabilities to be discovered by some of the newer LLM models. And so we have to make sure that we don't get overloaded. But I think that probably a big upshot of this is we're going to have to be a lot more, I don't know if brutal is the word, but we're going to need to be more selective about which vulnerability reports detail a serious enough risk to warrant working on in private, because working through vulnerabilities in public is often a whole lot faster and less work. And so, one of the ways that we can help temper that workload will be to not do things in private when we don't absolutely need to.
Can I also say not become complacent with the number of them coming in? I think it's like easy to start seeing so many come in that are bogus and look at the ones that might be legit and think, oh, this is just another, overreaction or hallucination or something like that. I don't want to see us like lose the signal in the noise.
Yep. And to that point, we published 2 OpenStack security advisories last year and have already published 7, I think, so far this year. So the workload is, even for legitimate reports, is substantially increased.
I've seen a couple of different incidences of bugs coming from, I would say, contributors without a proper reproducer, I would say, or a proper report format. At least, like, those were like kind of open questions. So if we really care about not like losing the benefit of people identifying vulnerabilities for us, I mean, I beg here for asking to have a clear reproducer or like a clear path for us to investigate, and not just like, oh, I think that there may be some security vulnerabilities somewhere, because that basically creates more load on our side to double check about the assertions that are made. I mean, yeah, probably there could be a good chances that yes, indeed, we do have a vulnerability, but I would definitely prefer if we have this kind of clear path for us to investigate, and not like just an open question.
Yeah, I'm sure that my opinion doesn't necessarily match the opinions of the other people on the VMT or people running and maintaining the projects that we are helping to oversee vulnerability reports for. But I personally would be in favor of pushing back on reporters to supply some sort of exploit scenario that's reproducible, and that if they can't do that in a relatively short period of time, then we switch the bug report to public and let people mull over it if they have time. And the worst case scenario there is, yes, it did actually describe a risk that that the reporter was unable to quantify. But to me, the end result being that we find those out and we fix them is what's important, and not necessarily that we do it in secret and have a whole bunch of red tape and bureaucracy around it.
But you mean let them file the bug as they kind of currently are today, and then push back on them, like in the bug report, to say like we need a reproducer or we're going to make this public, but not to like discourage the initial disclosure, like with a larger, or like a higher bar for them to actually fill out a form, right? Like I would rather know about and triage those things, if we can, before we, like, I wouldn't want people to like say, well, the form is so complicated and won't let me hit submit unless I attach a script, so I'm just gonna blog about it.
Right. No, I don't think that we should be making it harder for people to report bugs, but I do think that we should be raising the bar on what kind of reports we keep secret from our users in our community. So if there's not enough information to prove that there is a vulnerability, then we should have a fairly short timeline to switch it to public, and then let people hash it out, as they would any normal bug, and switch it back to being a vulnerability, but in public, if it turns out that there was an actual risk that wasn't clearly communicated originally.
Right. So just like, if I could use the recent one that we had with Nova as an example of why I would want to have, I agree, like moving more things to public sooner, especially if they're not clearly a vulnerability. But like, it was a bug that was reported that the reporter was pretty sure that QEMU was not checking some things, but it was too sophisticated of a reproducer that they were not able to figure out a way to even like try to see if it was a problem or not, but they were pretty sure that it was. And I was able to use an agent to generate code to do the complicated test thing and prove that we weren't. But if I hadn't done that, and the reporter was right and we were wrong, and we had marked that as public, the next guy could have come along and done the same thing that I did, but generate code to exploit the thing, not to prove that it was wrong, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, I just like, I think that we're on the same page about like, quicker path, a policy path to more quickly market as public, but I still want like the ability to like triage it first,
Right. Well, and we have some projects, like the Nova team has a pretty well staffed security review group who are pretty responsive. We've got a lot of other teams and projects in OpenStack that are not in that situation.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of projects where we've had vulnerability reports opened for them, and then we can't even get anyone to look at the report to confirm whether it's a risk or not. So for teams with very limited capacity for doing that already, I don't want to make it worse by expecting them to triage every single one of those in a short period of time. Certainly for your case, like, you saw some worrisome keywords in there. You knew it was an area where we'd had trouble in the past. You felt compelled to jump in there and double check it. And if you or one of the other Nova reviewers had said, hold off, let's not switch this public yet, like, obviously we wouldn't have, even under the suggested change in process.
Yeah. And even like for the projects that don't have that deep bench of people to do that quickly, there's benefit to everyone else to making it public at least, right? So that it's not a thing that may or may not be legit, but that nobody knows about, right? If no one's going to triage it, then being public means that operators can turn features off or at least know that there's something. So that's a benefit to me for sure. As long
Right.
as
And people who aren't necessarily maintainers of that project have the opportunity to pitch in and try to help come up with a fix. Whereas if we were to keep it secret, then obviously they don't have the information that there's even a problem there to start with. And to be clear, like there are open source projects out there that have much higher bars for reporting vulnerabilities. I came across one the other day where their policy is that they do not accept vulnerability reports unless they come with a patch that fixes the vulnerability. And otherwise, they just close the report. Like it's not even must be reproducible, must have a exploit scenario, whatever. It's just we don't accept vulnerability reports unless you've also got a fix for it.
Yeah, and like the current direction, the trajectory of things that are going, like I may, be sorry that I'm making the suggestion now. At the moment, even though the workload is increasing, I still want the ability to like have a low barrier to entry and triage the things. But it also may turn out that the signal goes to zero and we just, can't keep up. But like at the moment, I still want to be able to triage if possible. And if we get to that later situation where the noise is just way too noisy, then we'll be in bad shape.
Yeah. And we're currently cutting into the operators TC forum time slot.
Yes, we are, and we heard you, Dan. So, I mean, thanks for engaging on that aspect where you wished for it. uh, so on the parts where we're not able to reach the core sec teams, I think we can pick that up in the TC meeting in the future. So I feel like there are some project teams that we've had those issues with. We can talk through those specifically. So that's a wrap on our community leaders topics. And sorry, we didn't get through to open discussion, but we have 3 hours of the TC's time on Friday. So if you feel like adding something, please do add it to the parking lot at the very bottom of this Etherpad, and I can try to find some room for it.